Have you ever traveled through time? We do it every day.
Asgardia is a country with a population of more than 1 million people from more than 200 countries on Earth. Asgardia gives everyone equal opportunities, no matter what their earthly status is.
It is possible to create and live in the future right now. Are you ready? Forward progress is the solution to the entire human race. Our mission is to bridge new horizons. In Asgardia, there is no limit to the universal development in the fields of technology, finance, and arts. Asgardia is a new space and digital economy which creates opportunities for the global economy. We deliver innovations. Do you want to get on board with us? We are developing various kinds of digital businesses, attracting them to the Asgardia platform that can be backed by the means of our umbrella, i.e. franchising of the Asgardia brand. We can not only attract investments into space programs from prominent institutional investors, but also affordable amounts from the citizens of Asgardia. We comprise of more than 1 million people.
Asgardia is a chance to realize one's dream. This is a dream-driven space nation. Asgardia is a chance to belong to a community of free-thinking enthusiasts, goal-driven dreamers, and fearless innovators, theorists, and scientists.
We are the first space nation. One humanity, one unity.
Asgardia.
We are creating
the future.
To get the invite to the chairs thing, and I was like messaging everybody, and I'm like, what?
Yeah, no, it's difficult with the chairs meeting because it's only supposed to be chairs of committees. So we'll talk about that later, TJ.
No, well, it was supposed to just be for like a certain portion. They were supposed to send like a separate invite, but
Please,
all right,
please, a note from Asgardian TV for Peter. Please. Do you see the chat, Peter?
Can find it, yeah.
hi, Berta.
Hello, how are you? Television.
Hi, everybody. I'm good. I finally got into Slack, guys.
Did you catch up to all the talking?
Oh my gosh.
Hello, everybody.
Here's the story. You couldn't go back to back from the beginning.
It's gonna take me all weekend to go through all that, but I'll get caught up for sure. But I finally got into it this morning, so I was pretty happy.
Good to see you, everybody. Hello, welcome to Asgardia, the world's first. Good to see you all. Yeah, we're going to start in just a moment, well, in fact, let's start now.
Okay.
Thank you, Rebecca. We are live. I'm a bit late because I'd actually gone back into the previous meeting again. It's schoolboy error, but there we go. I'm Lembert Hobbit, Chair of Parliament of Asgardia, and I was warned that I looked too serious in the previous meeting, and I'll explain why in a minute. Somebody else has had some rather bad space news today, and I was watching that, but I'll come to that in a minute. For those who are joining us for the first time, this is Asgardia, the world's first space nation. And that means we're trying to create a society for space, which doesn't involve war. It does involve research, exploration, and crucially, two things. The first, permanent space habitation. That means that you don't come back to Earth from time to time. You're born there, you live there, you die there. And secondly, the first child born in space, which has to be under ethical conditions. Those are our two measures. And we've got till 2043 to achieve those. That's what we set, or Dr. Asher Bailey set, the founder of Asgardia. I don't know if you knew that. I haven't mentioned it for a long time. 2043. So we've got another 18 years. Should be enough. Should be enough. These Thursday meetings are informal. Sometimes they're long, sometimes they're short. Today, probably fairly short, not sure, of course. and that's because I have only a few things to talk about. Then we'll ask Peter Morn, the Deputy Chair of the Parliament, Chair of the other committee, what he wants to say about the Chair's meeting, and then we'll open it to everyone else. We keep this going as long as or short as we want, usually between 15 minutes and 50 minutes. That's what's normal, but we can do it up to an hour. Right, first of all, the landing of Asgardia's national symbols and other items was a great success last Sunday morning. Sunday, the 2nd of March, my birthday, was also when the spacecraft touched down. It was a perfect landing, an absolutely tremendous result. I'm so impressed. And it was done with LifeShip. We worked with them. Thank you very much, LifeShip, for delivering Asgardia's national symbols to the moon. This is a huge deal. It's the first time that Asgardia's national symbols have been on another planet, or another celestial object, which is not the Earth. So on the moon now, probably for the indefinite future, because I think it'll probably become a site of special interest when we finally inhabit the moon. Asgardia's national symbols are there. We are now out there beyond Earth on the solar system. Huge achievement. Massive thanks to Cheryl Gallagher. She was the inspiration to our involvement in that. And so she's taken advantage of the fact that Dr. Asher Bailey created Asgardia to get us to the moon. Very, very exciting. I hope to ask her to come and give a presentation on how she did that at some point in the future. She's not with us today, but hopefully she will be in the fairly near future. So thank you to her for all she's done. Really great work. That means that we can now say that Asgardia is on the moon. You can tell people that we have our national symbols there as a result of our commitment to actually walking the talk, of flying the fight, if you like. Good fight, peaceful fight for human endeavor. So that was huge. We had a 2.5-hour event last week. If you joined us, thank you. And thank you to colleagues here who also contributed. That was really very helpful. We also had a special guest, Simon Feast, the Chief Executive Officer of the British Interplanetary Society. This brings me to my second of 4 points. The BIS has been a big friend of Asgardia for quite a few years now. Simon Feast, the Chief Executive, joined us to watch the landing, the touchdown of our space nation symbols to the moon, and spoke very positively of Asgardia. We also agreed that when Cheryl Gallagher, who's the Minister for Culture, comes to the UK, we will try and meet with him, and hopefully we can do a series of interviews and programs for number 3, third point, Highway to the Stars, Dan Profier's excellent series. I spoke with Dan earlier on today, and I'm trying to organise for him to interview Simon Feast. Why is this important? Because that external endorsement is really valuable to us. The British Interplanetary Society is the longest, the longest such organisation. I'm trying to think of a better way of saying it. It has lasted longer than any interplanetary society on the Earth. It was founded in 1933. So it's 92 years old. And having their endorsement would be a fantastic benefit. So I'm hoping to organise some visits to the BIS headquarters in London and some interviews with Dan Profier. Those interviews will take place in their headquarters, if I can arrange that, the 19th or 20th of March, I expect. Cheryl's here on other matters, but I'm sure she'll do great things for Asgardia while she's here. Third of four things. After the great success of the previous digital sitting, I'm going to try to organise the dates for the next 3 sittings so that you know when they are for the rest of the year. I tend to leave it a little bit late. It's much easier for everyone to organise if I fix those sittings a bit early. So I think it'll be end of May, then beginning of October or end of September, and then the final one will be end of November or possibly beginning of December. Those would be the the dates I expect, but I will give you exact dates very soon. And then we can organize our schedules around those times. And finally, the reason I was distracted in the previous meeting, another spacecraft, I won't name it yet because it's still possible I'm wrong, but it's been attempting to land in the last 20 minutes on the, actually last 40 minutes on the moon, and it's gone missing. They say it landed, and they say that they're still in communication with it, but we can't see what's going on. So let's hope that theirs is a success as well. They were the first commercial company, non-state company, to ever land anything on the moon, but they've had one or two problems. So it'll be interesting to see if they do succeed in contacting their spacecraft. Maybe it's just a communications issue, but that's what I was interested in earlier on. What that tells us, though, is space is getting very interested. Aerospace, sorry, is getting very interested in the moon again. So we've been right to be always interested in the moon and beyond. Connected to that, I stayed up very late a couple of nights ago to watch the test flight of Elon Musk's Starship again. It was called off. I do not know if they've tried again. I've been too busy. But a lot of exciting things are happening in space, and a lot of them are private. Remember, Elon Musk pretty much funds the Starship himself. But it's a very exciting project, and he is massively reducing the cost of space travel. That's his great achievement. And the fact that he's able to do that opens up space much more. It's good for us because his 100-person Starliner will make going to the moon and beyond much cheaper than it would otherwise be. And who knows, maybe we'll collaborate in the future. There is no formal collaboration between SpaceX and Asgardia for now, but I always explain it this way. We are passengers, they're the taxi. We don't need to build our own taxi if we can hire one. So that's how I see it. And Elon Musk's operation, if it becomes the most financially favorable, that's interesting. There are other options as well, of course, Russia, China, and other countries that could be coming on stream too. So that's what I have. Quite exciting time, quite a lot of things happening in space. And great news, as I said before, Asgardia is on the moon. And I informed the head of nation of this just after we landed. He was very pleased. So well done, Cheryl. Peter, over to you.
Thank you, Lambert. A short chairs meeting tonight, not very well attended, but the cream were there, like you, Lambert, and me. And also we had some interesting input from Dr. Sarah, who came up with the idea of having a marketing campaign to get more of our residents involved with the various space exploits that you've just been talking about, the various rockets and the getting our DNA onto the moon and so on, which was interesting. But also, she came up with an excellent idea of having a welcome pack for new residents. So they would just not be told, yes, you are now a resident, but have some sort of certification for that and other things to involve them in all of the extramural activities of Asgardia. So that was very interesting. And if I know Sarah, now that she's come up with the idea, we'll find that she comes up with specific proposals around that idea fairly soon. I have to say also, I'll be getting my calendar, my space calendar tomorrow. It's arriving from the wholesaler, as it were. So that looks very exciting. And John's published online, John Fine, picture of him with his calendar. All very good stuff, and all Dr. Sarah's work. Well, and the team that she pulled around her as well. So relatively quiet, but lots of good ideas. There always are. Lots of things churning in the background, and eventually they come to fruition. And as I say, Dr. Sarah is one of the good ones for actually bringing these to true fruition. So thank you to her. Thank you to everyone. Thank you to you, Lambert, and thank you for looking a little bit more cheerful than you did in the last meeting.
Thank you very much. I was just watching that space mission. I don't know what the latest is. I've lost contact with a little bit now, just like they may have lost contact of their spacecraft. I can also give you a quick update on the SpaceX number 8 Starship launch. Super heavy, the heaviest, biggest, most powerful rocket ever built. It's going to be launched tonight. They think, and I think that's going to be at 23:30 GMT. That's what I think is going to happen. 23:30 GMT. I'll just tell you, yeah, that's 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time in America. 6:30 p.m. So I'll probably stay up and watch that. I'm pretty interested in it. They'll always put on a good show, whatever it actually does start. So yeah, as I say, I'm very interested in space. I don't know what the situation is with the current lander, whether it's been lost or partial success or something else. Right, anybody else? Over to you all. Not from further. Okay.
I couldn't find the little raised hand. Could I ask a question?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So I was meeting with Carl Sampson. Both of us are on the LMRG with John Fine and Ferda and a bunch of other really great individuals. And so, but we also are members of the Justice Committee. I am gratefully one of the deputies of Peters. And so we are trying to kind of facilitate, revamping and moving forward again with the Justice Committee and trying to get them, reinvested and, remotivated and trying to kind of bring back attendance again, since everything just kind of changed. So with the LMRG in place, I'm trying to find some clarification so that when we set up meetings, we know what to kind of put on the agenda to speak about and what we can talk about. Because I feel like there might be a smidge of contradiction. So maybe you or John Fine could maybe clarify it, or Peter, so that we make sure that we're not overstepping or a process just because of me being out on medical leave and things like that. I don't want to overstep that. So because on the, like in the Act on Acts, like section 12, number 2, something like that, it says, we and the Justice Committee is supposed to be reviewing legislation, but then the LMRG's purpose is to review legislation. So when we meet, if I was to hold a meeting for the Justice Committee, we're trying to decide what exactly are we supposed to discuss if the LMRG is the one that is, if we're going to be doing that with the LMRG, because I don't want to overstep that. So even if we are still reviewing it and we are a part of that process, that's fine. I just want to make sure we are addressing it appropriately and discussing it appropriately in that process, like how we're going to be a part of that process so that we know how to do it right. If you could answer that.
Yeah, sure. Simple answer, really, and I'll pass to John in a moment.
Okay.
Something I haven't said for a long time, and I only know this really because I was there at the beginning. The role of the Justice Committee is to check the legality of the legislation, not to check the sensible, how sensible it is, though inevitably it's tempting to start talking about the rights and wrongs of legislation. The reality is, all that the Justice Committee is meant to do is say this is not inconsistent, this is consistent with existing legislation and does not break Asgardia's existing laws and constitution. That's what it's meant to do. But through precedent really set by the previous chair of the Justice Committee, that was Salvos Mouzakitis, he then tended to say, in my opinion also, and then express his views about that piece of legislation. And now that has evolved as well, and we get quite a lot of fairly detailed feedback from the Justice team. What the LMRG is really there to do is to make sure that the whole document flows, it's not repetitive, that it's comprehensible, and it does whatever the person wants it to do. So they're not really checking the legality. They assume once the Justice Committee is finished with it, it is legal. They're checking the syntax, the intellectual consistency of it, and whether it's fit for use in terms of what it's trying to achieve. And that justice doesn't have to do that. You could have a stupid law, which is still legal, and technically justice could simply say it may be stupid, but it is legal. LMRG would say it's stupid. But let me go to John. John, do you want to add something?
Okay.
Yes. Well, okay. I got the act on acts right here in front of me. The section 15, item number 2 says any legislative proposal shall
I think
first
it's section 12. Section 12, I think.
listen to me. Any legislative proposal shall first be presented to the chairman of parliament and the Justice Committee for determination of constitutionality. And that, and what they call that a constitutionality determination, which is what the chair just said.
Yes.
Okay. Now and that's done before the first reading. That's done when it's just a draft proposal.
Okay.
Then if you go down to section 16, which is a little higher up in the process, it talks about the chair of parliament and members of committees of parliament will, with a special interest in the subject matter in the legislation proposal, shall deliberate on legislative proposals, determine whether the merits of that proposal. Okay. And now in the past, the chair had been doing that, and just the chair, but he created a merit review group. Please let me finish talking before you interrupt. He created a review group and to do that, which is called the LMRG. Now that's the process and that's verbatim to the Act on Acts. Okay. Let's see here. Section 12, you said that only
it was you already read it. You already read it.
That's the scope of Parliament powers. It doesn't really say.
You already read it. You had already read it.
So that's just straight out of the Act on Acts. And the chair said maybe that people misunderstood the language in the Act on Acts, but it's very clear that section 16 is separate from the other section, which means that it's an addition to whatever the other one. The other one, if you notice, it's at the beginning of those sections. Okay, so that's the beginning of the basis of Parliament powers, or that's the beginning of the process, and then believe it or not, laws work that way. They work. They progress as you go into the law, and especially this one. This one's set up that way. It progresses in levels as you're reading through it, especially that section. But a lot of laws are set up that way. This constitutes this constitutes that, this constitutes that. So anyway, even in U.S. law, we have a lot of that stuff. But anyway, that's my explanation.
TJ?
Yeah. So okay. So yeah, that the clarification was only meant because I just want to make sure that we know where our process is so that we're not overstepping the new process. Because when we're trying to discuss with the Justice Committee, like if I start saying, okay, let's start having meetings again, I just don't want to create a process that doesn't need to be created. I don't want to overstep a process that's already initiated. And I just want to make sure that if we are part of, say, a process prior to the first reading, because that's the way it is, that we want to make sure that we're consistently a part of that process and that we make sure that we do it properly and we do it consistently. And that I'm portraying that message and we are communicating that message and we're communicating it properly, because just wasn't consistent and cohesive prior to that. So that's all I want to make sure that when I set up a meeting starting next week for the Justice Committee and say, hey guys, let's start having meetings again, you know, that we're being consistent, we're not overstepping the LMRG, because the LMRG has their process, and we want to make sure that that's being followed accurately, and that the Justice Committee is not overstepping that. And if their whole purpose is to determine legality, then that's great. And we will stick with that, and we'll make sure that we're compliant with that, and that we are staying on top of that. And then we will just focus on that and make sure that we are a part of that process, and we'll stay consistent with that. And if we have questions or concerns, me and Carl are a part of the Justice Committee as well as the LMRG. So we'll be able to ask questions to you, John, because you are the chair, or like Peter or any of the members, if for some reason we feel like there is a question or a concern where it might overstep a boundary in any way, shape, or form. We just want to make sure that we are communicating properly so that it's not overstepping something that we don't need to be overstepping, and that we are not misinterpreting what we need to be doing and creating issues where there don't need to be an issue. So I don't know if you misinterpreted why I was asking the question, but we just want to make sure that we are doing the right thing and not creating issues because the LMRG has been created, so that we are not misunderstanding what our role is.
Okay, to be clear, once again, the legal consistency of the legislation is the job of the justice team. The intellectual and practical benefit and the syntax of the document, that's what LMRG does. I used to do all of that. I used to do all of what LMRG does, all of it. And that was just, it wasn't very sustainable, because we got more sophisticated at the beginning when things were simpler. One person could do it. But now we've got an entire committee that is doing what I used to do on my own. So that was it, really. I think Ricky's put it well. As Lembit said, legal is just to make sure an act follows the Constitution and act on acts. And also, I would add to what Ricky says, and to make sure it's consistent with other legislation. So that's the other thing it does. Right. John?
Yeah, no, it wasn't a misunderstanding, but I totally understand where you're coming from. But really, nothing has actually changed on your end. The process there has remained the same, because this is coming after you all do what you do. The LMRG doesn't get enacted until after you all do what you do. But you have to do that with, of course, the collaboration with the chair of parliament, according to what the law reads. But and that's really basically, we're talking about the development of the first reading. The draft act, and then the draft act, and the chair takes the draft act and helps the sponsor develop it into a first reading, et cetera, et cetera. And believe it or not, Salvos used to do this by himself back in the old days, along with the chair of parliament. But I think it's exciting that your committee wants to continue in that process of what Salvos did. But like I said, it really hadn't changed anything on your end. The only change would actually, the only person it affected would be the chairman of parliament, because now we're doing what he used to do. And that's basically the only change that was, made. But
Okay, so just one last question to clarify. So members of parliament, because I just want to make sure, because my committee, like our justice committee is here, Ida's here, or Carl's here, and these are like pretty prominent members that are very, very active in the justice committee and have contributed a lot, and usually are very active, and are going to help us reach the other members so we can get them back on track. When we are initiating legislation, members of parliament, prior to creating new legislation, we are to review the legality part when they're first initiating it in that first process during that first reading. And then after that, the LMRG is then stepping into
actually, you would do it before the first reading.
Right.
before the first reading.
So like that.
Yeah,
close-
and I mean, because you want it right before it's presented to Parliament.
Right.
You don't want it.
Okay.
You don't want to wait till after it's been presented to Parliament. But I mean, that's just protocol. But yeah, and the and you know, because you can, if you know how to get in touch with elbows, you'll find out that he used to get tons of proposals that were nowhere near in the wheelhouse of Asgardia. It didn't follow the Constitution in any way. Didn't follow the Act on Acts. Didn't and he had to reject those. He just said, "No, I'm sorry, I can't do nothing with that." Now he was very gentleman about it. He'd write a whole list of things that was wrong with it and give that back to you. He did it to mine. If one of mine was unconstitutional, he wrote a whole list of things of why it was unconstitutional and sent it back to me and said, "You fix these things, then I'll send it forward to the chair of Parliament. If you don't fix them, I won't." And that was basically how he did it. And he was the chair, of course, of the Justice Committee. And I'm sure he had members help him with that. I don't know. I wasn't in the Justice Committee, so I can't tell you. But that's how they did it. And they did it. This was before it even became a first reading. And then when the chair of Parliament got it, he helped develop it into a first reading. And then it got put on the agenda, and people voted for it, yay or nay or abstain, and then it would go to the chair, and he would start developing it for second reading along with the sponsor. But now he's created the LMRG to do that development, the merit review, which is what it was called. So, yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. That clarified it. I think that really did. It's just we're coming back, and I just wanted to make sure that we're not making the wrong choices. So thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much. That's helpful. That's actually helpful. We haven't had that conversation for a long, long time. Well, ever not. We've never had that conversation since the LMRG was set up, so that's useful. Further, you're next.
Thank you very much. Also, there are some important legislations that are coming, and they need to be thoroughly discussed with the Parliament, in between the different committees. So, not all of this is Justice Committee's work. So, some area we need to work together other than the committees only. We cannot invite everyone to the committee meetings, but from the committee, some responsible people will go for the legislation to discuss the details as an idea, as a structure, as a collapse of the other legislations. Is there any point that we are doing twice or not? So this is important. LMRG is important because of this kind of things. We will be discussing together as 5 committee members representing our committees with the government and with John's guidance. Together, the wrong sides, missing signs, or done twice or triple times, so we can eliminate any mistakes. This is important point. Besides the Justice Committee, we have this point in LMRG. Thank you very much, and thank John for his effort.
Thank you. Yes, I second that. Well, Fred says it's right. She's been here a long, long time, and this is actually quite useful as a review of how we're meant to do things. Carl.
Hello, everybody. I just wanted to weigh in here because I worked with TJ and the other members of the Justice Committee when we were developing the legislative review process that was done over a year ago. I think TJ has represented and expressed everything that the Justice Committee needs to know at this point. Basically, our only overarching question really is where do we go from here? So I appreciate the clarifications that were conveyed today, as these help us recalibrate and move forward. I think the path forward is really to find an efficient synergy between all the committees, as Ferda pointed out, but most especially between the Justice Committee and the LMRG. So I really look forward to having a more seamless communication channels with everyone involved. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful discussion. John?
Yeah, thank you, Carl. Appreciate that. And I just want to say, in the first parliament, Salvos made it real easy. He just told everybody to email their proposals to him first, and that's what we did. And when he would get the proposals, just a raw proposal, now draft proposal. And when he'd get them, he'd run through them, and then he'd send them back saying, "Hey, this is right, this is wrong, this is right, this is wrong." And then when they got it to the point where Salvos was satisfied, then Salvos would send that to the chair of parliament, and it actually worked out really well. And then the chair of parliament would work up a first reading. But that's just a suggestion. That's what the Justice Committee did the first parliament, and it worked very well. They got all the proposals, legislative draft proposals. They got them all first, and then they went through them, and they checked the, like I said, legality of it. Is it constitutionally sound? Is it Act on Act sound? Is it Government Act sound? Does it correspond with, the objectives of the Asgardia legal system? And anything they found wrong with it, they annotated it at the bottom of the proposal and sent that back to the sponsor. And then the sponsor corrected it, sent it back to Justice Committee. Once everything got fixed, it got sent to the chair of parliament for first reading development. And that's pretty much, and that actually corresponds with the Act on Acts, how things should work. But anyway, that should give you some insight.
Thank you very much, John. Ada, then TJ again.
I'm here.
Yeah, I can hear you. Hi,
Okay,
Ada. Good to hear
Hi.
from you.
Yes, thank you for all the parliaments in present. Yes, like John Fine said, since 5 years ago, 6 years ago, we got the same pattern. I was with Salvo, and the process is the same. All the documents to proceed, they go to all the communities. They check them and verify them and send it to justice. If justice verify or send it back to review again. That's the process, always been like that. There's no change. I think it's more little bit like review it and fix the problem of the document and then go back to justice. That's always been like that. Thank you, Mr. Lambert.
Thank you. Yeah, it does go round a bit, but it's good. So we now have developed it a bit more. Sometimes if something comes through and it's not right, we'll run it through second reading or third reading twice. We've done that. My mission is to get the registration right. I'm not worried about doing things twice or taking a long time, as long as we get it right, because we're doing this for a space nation, which should, in its current form and in terms of its derivatives, last for centuries or millennia. We may be making a difference for thousands of years. We don't really know. So we have to get it as right as we can now, because otherwise the mistakes we make will be carried forward and either have to be corrected by those people who follow us, or they don't get corrected at all. So that's a very good point, well made. TJ, then Sarah.
So the only thing that I wanted to, I guess, clarify is, and just make sure that I reiterate is, I know that the first parliament was mentioned, but I would like to point out that the Justice Committee did create an entire legislative review process, and we worked really, really hard on it. And we did try very hard to implement that process, including making it official in the Asgardia Institute of Standards, where we basically created a process almost exactly like the LMRG. And which is why I'm completely okay with what the process of the LMRG is, because it's basically an implementation of what we already created, which is great, that somebody was able to implement what we wanted. But the only issue that we need to make sure that we address is that if the Justice Committee is a part of that first initial process, that we need to make sure that we receive that information. So like if there are documents that we need to be reviewing, they need to make sure that they are sending them to the Justice Committee, regardless of who they need to be sending it to make sure that we are reviewing them before they are going to the LMRG, so that it is following the proper lines. So that way we make sure that we know where our processes are. I think that's where we were getting like the disconnect. So that way we know, because that was kind of a problem before. And I know our minister had mentioned a few things that had happened last year where legislation was being presented that he hadn't even seen, that was going to like legislative settings and stuff, so that we hadn't even reviewed. So we want to make sure that we are a part of the process, because we care, and we do care about what we do, but we also want the LMRG to do what they need to do, because we care about what they do, because obviously we created the legislative review process for a reason, and we do care about what its purpose is, and the LMRG is exactly the same purpose. So why would we not want it to succeed? Because we care about Asgardia and we want Asgardia to succeed. So we want to be cohesive, and we want to make sure, but we want to make sure that parliamentarians know that if they're submitting legislation and they know that they need to be sending it to us in that initial process, to make sure that they are sending it to us, so that we can review it and then send it to the so that we know to send it to the LMRG afterwards. So I think that's the only thing that we need to make sure that we clarify.
Yeah, well, the process actually has to work like that, because all legislation goes to Justice Committee for first reading. None of it goes to the LMRG. So de facto, the first reading goes to Justice Committee only. De facto, second reading can go to both, but I suppose it can go, it doesn't, well, we need to work that out. I suppose it probably should go to the Justice Committee first and then LMRG. That is logical. If Linda and Aliona can make a note, that's a really good point. Linda and Aliona,
give me like a deadline maybe, and tell me when he wants me to send it to like the LMRG, or like how much of a time frame we have for the committee to send it, so that way there isn't so much.
No, I need to interrupt. Okay. All right, I need to interrupt here. Okay, look, the LMRG doesn't engage until after it becomes a first reading. And the Justice Committee is already represented in the LRG, so there's no sense in sending it anywhere. The LMRG sending, because I'm right there in Parliament. I get the draft just like anybody else. So the actual first reading, I take it straight from parliamentary records. That when Linda puts those records in the Google Drive as the permanent records for Asgardia, that's where I get my reading and start developing the LMRG version of the legislation. But also the sponsor of it has to send the rest of the act, because the first reading, but everybody has all that done anyway, but the first reading doesn't go over the entire all the provisions, and then so I put all that into it, and then the Justice Committee, which is represented in the LMRG along with the Justice Ministry, can do their part then. and that's in the rule the handbook of the LMRG. Every committee has a part to play in the LMRG because every committee, like safety and security, most acts have something to do with safety and security. Most acts have something to do with education. You know, there may be provisions in there that specifically deal with education. So naturally, the education committee would need to chime in on that. Did they, if they see something that just doesn't seem right? The only area that the Justice Committee messes with is the legality of it, the constitutional legal framework, right? And that goes with the rest of the laws that have already been passed within Asgardia. That's their area of concern. Now, as far as the LMRG being similar to what the review process you're talking about, and you've actually said this before, where you and I need to clarify that. Okay, the LMRG is nothing like what the process that you all created. It is similar, yes, because it's a review process, and all review processes, I don't care where you're from or what you're reviewing, they're going to be similar. Just like any uh, uh, process that you have for your, I can't think of it right now, but I took the the Parliament procedures. I used all current, real, certified laws or regulations to build the LMRG. I didn't take anything from your all's. I looked at it, and there are similarities, and it's going to be because like a flow chart is a flow chart. I don't care what flow chart you're doing. A flow chart's a flow chart, and they're all going to look the same. They're all going to have similarities, or in a review process, a review process. They're all going to have similarities. That's just common sense. But I took the parliamentary procedures and regulations that Lambert did in 2018. Hadn't updated them since then, but and I used that document. I used the Act on Acts, and I used the Constitution. And those are the three items I used to develop or to use as my managing documents for the LMRG. And that's how I came up with. And as far as Lambert had a flow chart in his 2018 Parliament procedures, he had a flow chart in there. And I took that same flow chart and just added one spot in it, the LMRG process. Everything else the same as what Lambert had in his flow chart. So if I copied off anybody, I copied off of his. But I copied off of legal documents because I would never create anything off of something that hasn't been considered legal yet. And I used the Act on Acts, and like I said, Constitution, and the rules and Parliament procedures that Lambert passed back in 2018 to do that with. So I want to clarify that. I think you all did a great job coming up with that procedure, and it's a great procedure for justice to use for their process that they're going to do there in the Justice Committee. And yes, and that process hadn't changed. That process was the same. Of course, Salvos did basically the same thing what you all drew up, but he just didn't put it all down in writing, and you all just put it in writing. That's basically, but your process is no different than what the first Parliament did. And I mean, I award you for putting it in writing. That's great. I think things should be put in writing. I'm a very avid believer in putting things in writing, but I don't want any confusion to think that it's just some that I copied off of your work, because that didn't happen. Okay, and in no way. I mean, I thought it was great work, and I look forward to seeing it implemented within your committee. But the biggest thing is that process that you created and the responsibility of that committee has never changed. And what should have been happening is everybody should have been sending their proposals to you. All right, draft proposals, draft legislative proposals, not projects. Projects are not legal; those are business. You know, projects would go to, well, nobody. Well, right now, projects go to manufacturing committee because they have a projects coordination area for that. Or you could send them. There's an area actually on the website, the Asgardia website, to put projects in. But and projects is just an extracurricular activity that parliamentarians can do. It's not even in the Act on Acts at all. It's not in any of our laws for us to do projects. That's just something that we do. But the actual legislative proposals, like somebody wants to whatever invent whatever act they want to invent, they need to be sending that to your committee first. When they get it done, when they get it all drafted, and they get a nice outline of how they vision that law to be created, it needs to go to you first, period. And then your committee sits there and does your review process on it and sends it back to them. Right now, if it's perfect, which I seriously doubt that it will be, because no law is ever perfect in the first draft. It usually takes me 3 drafts to get any of mine even close to being correct. So, you know, I scrutinize my own work, believe me, more than anybody. But and then once you all get it right with your process that you got, which is a perfect process, you got back and forth, then it should be sent to the parliament chair for first reading development. And then it gets developed for first reading, and then it gets on the agenda. And but that was the same process that we did in the first parliament.
Thanks,
John. The only thing is it wasn't put in writing. But I commend you all for putting it in writing. But like I said, it's not much different than what we did in the first parliament. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's quite extensive. Let's leave that for now. It's fairly clear. Let's go to, okay, well, I'm not going to continue with this now. I will tell you that, to summarize, Justice does law, LMRG does content and structure and so forth, and anything apart from checking it's consistent with existing legislation and constitution, essentially. And that's basically it. Sarah, I know you're walking, but if you want to come in now. Probably the worst possible moment to ask Sarah to come in. I think she's probably moving. See if she comes back in a minute. Right. Okay. Thanks. Anybody else? We'll come to Sarah in a minute when she stops, if she still wants to come in. I've got one piece of news. The people in charge of the Athena spacecraft, Intuitive Machines, I think they're called, they say that they're in contact with the spacecraft on the lunar surface, but they don't know what's happened to it. They don't know if there's a problem with it or not. So that's a mystery. It will remain a mystery for now. Anybody else got anything you'd like to raise? Okay, thank you. Peter had to go. That's fine. Let me summarize. Sarah, if you can hear me, if you want to still come in, just raise your hand. That will be fine. So, all right. Looking ahead then, as I say, the spacecraft from Intuitive Machines is doing something, but we don't know quite what it's doing. We don't understand quite if it's working or not, but that's not for us. But looking ahead, I'm going to try and put the dates for the next 3 digital sittings in place provisionally so that you can work on that. You understand, hopefully, the legislative process. First reading still goes to Justice, does not go to LMRG. Second reading goes to Justice, then LMRG. Third reading goes to Justice, then LMRG. That's basically the process. But that was very useful clarification, actually, because we have not had that conversation since LMRG was established, so it's really good. So the other 2 things, as I said, I mentioned the digital settings. The other 2 things are that really well done again for last Sunday morning. It was a great landing. We are on the moon. That's really important. We are on the moon. Asgardia has national symbols on the moon, thanks to Cheryl Gallagher. And as I say, Dr. Igor Ashur-Bailey, our founder, is very pleased about that too, as he should be. Really great. Congratulations on all of that. And then finally, tonight at 23:30 GMT, that's best guess, which is which I think is 18:30 Eastern Standard Time, I think. I was trying to check that. Won't find it fast enough. Check the time for yourself, of course, for your local area. They are going to try and launch the space, the Starship again, test flight 8. I'm sure that it's 23:30 GMT, so that would be 18:30 Eastern Standard Time. I think that's right. But if you want to watch it, it's not obligatory. Let me just get this right. We're going to check now. Starship launch time 8. Okay, here we go. Yeah, 18:30 Eastern Standard Time. That's 23:30 GMT. I'll stay up to watch that. I think I'm interested. They had some problem the last time. They cancelled it a couple of days ago. Let's see if they launch this time. Another interesting flight. Great. Thank you, everybody. Very useful discussion. Have a good rest of the evening. We got to 27, so when we get to 13, I shall shut this down. Have a good evening, and if Aliona, you can give me, and Linda, you can give me my action steps, and I'll carry them out. With that, thanks very much. See you soon.